Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm Asadullah Khan from Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Sri Lankan Army Commander-in-Chief who invited me to attend this prestigious forum and requested me to share my thoughts with you on this important subject, which I believe is very timely in manner. In the morning, there was a confession made. I have another confession to make that my co-panelist, she has discussed very illustratively what had happened in the past 3 decades in Sri Lanka. So my speech or the presentation will be more brief. So the paper I wrote, I won't be reading it all. So this is a time saving for you, all of you, I believe. I will not go into the details of the historic details of what happened to this beautiful country actually. But I will be rather focusing on the facts that what helped this strong and resilient nation to bring this sort of complicated militancy and the issue of terrorism to end in this state. Therefore, my presentation will be following the 2 major parts. The first is how the state dealt with the LTTE insurgency, and the second is obviously the post-conflict scenario, like what happened in the post-conflict scenario. The 3-decade-long insurgency in this country came to conclusive end in May 2009, following the military defeat of the LTTE, also known as the so-called Tamil Tigers, which is an internationally proscribed organization. The LTTE was notorious for its wild terror tactics, such as use of suicide bombings and carrying out attack on civilians, the country leadership abducting children as a child soldiers, forced money collections, and in case of non-compliance, the attack on the economic infrastructure of the country. We observed the assassination of the former Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, the assassination of Sri Lankan President Rana Singhe Premadasa, the systematic assassination of more than 40 prominent mainstream Tamil political leaders, including the Sri Lankan former Foreign Minister Lakshman Kadargama, and the deliberately inflicting casualties by holding civilians as human shields in the final phase of war and shooting at those who attempted to flee. So the so-called Tigers were considered one of the most ruthless insurgent and terrorist organization in the world. They were vanquished by Sri Lankan armed forces in May 2009, and in order to rehabilitate who had surrendered or had been taken captive, the Sri Lanka developed a multifaceted program to engage and transform the violent attitudes and behaviors of those Tiger leaders, members, and collaborators. The one important thing that I would like to mention here is that in the wake of 9/11, Sri Lanka took advantage of the new atmosphere and the prominence given to waging a war on terror. And in that wake, the Sri Lankan government launched a focused diplomatic campaign to convince the countries to take steps against the Tamil Tigers present in other countries and launching their campaigns from there. So Colombo managed to create the pockets of support for its cause in the higher echelons of power in most Western countries, I would say. Many began dismantling Tiger networks using their intelligence apparatus and legal means. in the US, Britain, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, the representatives and activists of the LTTE were arrested and deported, which severely damaged its ability to raise funds and to continue its activities inside the Sri Lanka. Therefore, this wise war on a diplomatic front helped Sri Lanka a lot. The process encouraged the government to continue its attempt to defeat the organization militarily. Nevertheless, once the military campaign on the ground began to gain momentum, some governments outside the Sri Lanka, the other Western world and the other states, started pressurizing to cease its effort and to agree to its renewed talks. After Sri Lanka's adamant refusal to the request, then the Western governments and other attempted to form an international front to force it to halt the campaign on humanitarian grounds. Now this was the final call, I believe, for the Sri Lankan nation, like what is their priority? Will they want to end this sort of militancy, or will they go for other options? I believe, personally, this is my own opinion. How will you justify the deaths happened to the civilians, to the Sri Lankan armed forces on the humanitarian ground? Because I believe I have the figures, more than the death toll was like, the overall death toll was more than 80,000. So are those lives not important on humanitarian grounds? So that was the final call. I would say nations give, sort of give their lives to end these kind of militancies, and this is what Sri Lanka has done. Over the years, LTTE formed various administrative mechanisms such as police force, courts, financial system, and the political party. It also supported a strong military component. Throughout the conflict, the LTTE was justly regarded as one of the deadliest and the most sophisticated guerrilla groups in the world, credited with pioneering use of the female suicide bombers and other means of terror. So, after the failed attempts of the defeat to LTTE that wrought much desperation and hardship, the peace process was initiated in 2002. The process, brokered by Norway and sponsored by US, EU, Japan, lasted for 3 years, but ultimately it broke down. In 2005, a new government rose to power in Sri Lanka, and they decided to do the a full-blow military campaign was launched in 2006, which, despite the domestic and international pressures, was ultimately a successful story. It destroyed the Tamil Tigers, and in process, its leaders and founders were killed, and it forced the surviving remnant to surrender unconditionally in May 2009. If we analyze the situation regionally, China is the largest foreign donor to Sri Lanka. It has also proved its worth by encouraging its ally Pakistan to support the Sri Lankan government in this regard. Indeed, Pakistan provided military assistance to Sri Lanka, and it is one of the largest suppliers of the arms and ammunition in the previous wars against the LTTE. It also covers joint training programs and intelligence cooperation at that time also, and right now as well. This alliance spilled over to the economic arena when the Sri Lanka was the first to sign the free trade agreement with Pakistan in 2005. Pakistan's influence on Sri Lanka's military ability did not go unnoticed by LTTE, and that was the reason when the LTTE carried out a failed suicide attacks on the Pakistani High Commissioner in Sri Lanka. Since then, the bilateral ties between Sri Lanka and Pakistan have only grown stronger. I would also like to mention here that Pakistan's stance against terrorism is not a new one. Pakistan has been standing with the established governments a long way back. And I'm saying this because many people think that Pakistan has been fighting against terrorism in the post-9/11 scenario or the post-2001 scenario, but this is not actually the case. We have been standing with the governments who are fighting terrorism. We have been helping them, and we are still open for that. Coming towards the post-conflict arena, in which, as my co-panelist has amply mentioned, that Sri Lanka, in its rehabilitation program, introduced a 6+1 model of community engagement. I will not go into the details, what were those, my co-panelist has already discussed those, but an independent assessment by the University of Maryland, USA, about that program was made, in which they have found that a significant decline was observed in the detainees who were supportive of the violence before. This was because of the dignity and advocacy, I believe. I believe that the dignity was a significant aspect of the rehabilitation program, where the beneficiaries developed genuine friendship with the center staff and guards, and the feeling of being respected led to the de-radicalization process. Here I would say that rehabilitation and community engagement in counterterrorism strategy that is a very long-lasting and a sustainable thing. Former combatants who were rehabilitated and have returned to their home and communities remain vulnerable to recidivism. The community is the base from which terrorists are recruited. Therefore, the rehabilitation and de-radicalization of former terrorists is an ongoing process. It is essential to continuously assess the rehabilitation programs and the progress made by the former combatants. The aftercare process of the reintegration beneficiary is a vital aspect to ensure smooth transition into the community life. While within the rehabilitation, the beneficiaries are supported to de-radicalize and re-engage in the community. It is essential to conduct the ongoing community engagement programs to prevent re-radicalization and the reintegrated beneficiaries, as well as to build the community resilience as a counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency strategy. Now, what is the lesson learned from all this that happened, or I would say, I would put it in another way, that where is the link that is missing in the Sri Lankan counter-terrorism strategy, or there is a need of little more focus on that link. I believe hard power is the necessary thing in fighting the evils of terrorism. But we have observed that hard power alone is not a useful thing, or not a long-lasting thing in the issue of confronting the terrorism. So the term coined soft power is very interesting in this regard. Soft power development is very necessary, I believe, in the post-conflict phase, as this is in the phase, the phase that Sri Lanka is going through, and the same phase Pakistan is going through, because in Pakistan we are also in the decline of terrorism, in the post-army public school attack, in which we lost beautiful children, more than 150 beautiful children. And after that, the resolve against terrorism goes much more stronger. And finally, we have decided to launch the campaign, a military campaign and a soft power campaign in the form of a national action plan in our country. So the Sri Lanka, I believe, is rich in culture, rich cultural values, political values, a stable political system, strong foreign policy, a better economy, which can be much better or which can be doing much better in coming years. So all the ingredients of soft power are present in the country. All you need is to bring a little more focus. There is a focus. The tourism industry is developed. All other aspects are covered, but a little more needs to be plugged in. So this is the thing I was mentioning. Okay, to conclude, I must mention that in any region of the world, the lifeline of the nation is assured through hard power. No nation should compromise on the hard power. So the world has witnessed how China, US, Russia, and other European nations used a sort of mixed of power approach to dominate the world. Sri Lanka is currently in a phase where it is developing its soft power with hard power, but the perfect level of that mix is yet to be determined. So that will be a breakthrough point where all the successes against the counterterrorism will be showing their result. Therefore, the perfect mix of hard and soft power in accordance with the nation's limitations and opportunities will define its position in maintaining a peaceful coexistence in the international and regional level. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening me so patiently. On that note, I thank you once again. I look forward to add more knowledge capital from this conference.